Friday. Hello and welcome to A News. My name is Tim Tongana, coming to you live from Baku. Here are the headlines. US President Donald Trump says Iran war could end soon as Tehran and Muscat near a Strait of Hormuz shipping deal. Houthi strikes killed dozens in Yemen as Saudi Arabia warns of further attacks. And at least 100 people have died in mass migrant crossings into Spain's Ceuta enclave, where thousands remain stranded. First, this afternoon, President Donald Trump says the war with Iran could end soon as negotiations over the Strait of Hormuz continue. His comments come as Iran and Oman move closer to a new shipping arrangement for the strait, although commercial traffic is still heavily restricted.
US President Donald Trump says he believes the conflict with Iran could end soon, as negotiations over the Strait of Hormuz are showing signs of progress. Speaking at the White House, Trump did not confirm that a deal had been reached, but said talks were moving in a positive direction.
But I think we're doing very well. I'm involved in the negotiation. I think we're doing fine. It could be soon, yeah.
Despite diplomatic efforts, shipping through the Strait of Hormuz remains heavily restricted. Only a limited number of commercial vessels are crossing the waterway each day. Iranian state media reports that Tehran and Oman are close to agreeing on a new framework to manage maritime traffic through the strait. Under the proposed arrangement, vessels entering the Gulf would pass through Iranian waters, while ships leaving would use routes that are closer to Oman. Iran describes the plan as a new regional security model rather than a full return to previous navigation arrangements. The agreement still requires approval from Iran's Supreme National Security Council before it can be formally announced. The Strait of Hormuz normally handles about 1/5 of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas supplies, making any deal to restore commercial shipping closely watched by international markets.
Now, as talks over the strait advance, its closure continues to affect global industries, including agriculture. The UN warns that soaring fertilizer prices could threaten Afghanistan's wheat harvest next year, despite forecasts of a strong harvest this year. Our correspondent Tamim Bahez reports.
The UN Food and Agriculture Organization, or FAO, says Afghanistan is on track for an excellent wheat season this year, thanks to above-average rainfall across much of the country. However, the agency warns that high fertilizer prices are putting those gains at risk. According to the FAO, many farmers may not be able to afford enough fertilizer for their wheat crops. This could result in lower yields and could potentially affect food security in the 2027 harvest season. To address the challenges, the FAO is appealing for $38.3 million to provide certified wheat seeds and fertilizer to 600,000 farmers across Afghanistan. The FAO says the spike in fertilizer prices is linked to disruptions in the global supply chain caused by tensions in the Middle East. The organization has previously warned that instability in the region had disrupted fertilizer exports and increased costs worldwide, threatening agricultural production in vulnerable countries. Millions of Afghans are already facing food insecurity. The FAO says that helping farmers is essential for protecting next year's harvest and strengthening the country's food supply. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Iran's parliament is reviewing a draft bill that would ban US and Israeli vessels from passing through the Strait of Hormuz. It will also impose fines on ships violating the proposed rules. Under the proposal, military and civilian cargo linked to Israel would also be blocked as Tehran seeks to strengthen control over the Strait of Hormuz. Lawmakers are reviewing the bill and consulting experts before they make a final decision. Meanwhile, the uncertainty over the strait has pushed oil prices higher. Brent crude has climbed over $83 a barrel, and U.S. crude also rose. Now, the prospect of renewed conflict between the United States and Iran is raising fresh concerns over regional stability and the wider global economy. Turkey is calling on both sides to step back from confrontation and return to diplomacy. Adam Murrow for A News reports from Istanbul.
Turkey's National Security Council has urged the United States and Iran to return to the negotiating table, warning that renewed conflict could affect the entire region and disrupt critical global trade routes. The appeal was issued after a Thursday meeting chaired by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan at the presidential complex in Ankara. In a statement issued after the meeting, the council said it had reviewed possible risks posed by renewed fighting, warning that further escalation could spill over into neighboring countries and threaten international shipping lanes. The council called on the warring parties to refrain from the use of force and resume talks aimed at achieving a permanent settlement. The warning comes amid mounting concerns that a wider regional conflict could threaten maritime traffic, especially through the Strait of Hormuz, the Bab el-Mandeb, and the Red Sea. Together, these waterways carry a significant share of the world's oil, liquefied natural gas, and container traffic, making them vital arteries for the health of the global economy. Their prolonged disruption has already delayed commercial shipping, driven up insurance costs, increased energy prices, and placed further strain on already fragile global supply chains. Ankara has consistently warned against any military escalation that could jeopardize freedom of navigation or undermine regional stability. At the same time, it has sought to maintain dialogue with both Tehran and Washington, while also calling for a negotiated end to the months-long crisis. The Council's statement also highlights growing concerns that the economic consequences of a broader Middle East conflict could extend well beyond the region, affecting global trade, energy markets, and international shipping. This is Adam Murrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Now for a discussion on the strait's effect on global energy and trade markets, I'm joined by John Roberts, an energy and security specialist in the UK. Hello and welcome to A News.
Hello, it's good to be with you.
Thank you so much. So right off the bat, if the disruption continues, how quickly does oil that's higher and gas high prices and shipping costs translate to higher prices for ordinary consumers?
The curious thing is that I think, in a sense, we've actually achieved the sort of upper level. In other words, oil is currently at around $83 a barrel, sometimes surging to about 86, but it's nowhere near the $100 a barrel that it was during earlier phases of this crisis. It's as if the world is adapting to the concept or the possibility that the Strait of Hormuz might never be routinely open in the way it was before the launch of the US-Israeli assault on Iran in February.
So I'm just curious, though, the effects then on ordinary consumers around the world.
They're going to have to live with, in effect, something like the current price structure in their various countries. Now, this means that in the United States, the concept of $4 a gallon more is going to be norm. It means that in Europe, we're going to be talking about 170, 180 per litre. I think we've got all sorts of strange positions right now. But the bottom line is we are just getting used to this. And therefore, if the straits are opened and trade routinely resumes and people start worrying less that it's going to be interrupted, then we might see a near permanent fall in prices. But that doesn't seem likely right now. Even the opening that Iran and Oman are discussing is going to be one that the rest of the world will look on with worry and concern, because is it going to break down? Who's going to guarantee it? What is the role of the United States, notably its continued pursuit of sanctions against Iran and its threats of a blockade against Iran? What will that do to the security of the strait? It leaves it, shall we say, in doubt. And as long as the strait is in doubt, we're going to just simply have to learn to live with current oil prices.
So the strait carries about a fifth of global oil and LNG flows. How serious is the risk of global energy markets if traffics stay this low?
Traditionally, yes, it carries about a fifth of global oil supply. But in fact, if you look at it, that's not the 20 million barrels a day of global energy supply. The actual loss is more like 8 or 9 million barrels a day. That's because Saudi Arabia has managed to diversify its export routes, notably by using the Jubal to Yanbu pipeline. It's because there's a certain amount of UAE oil going out through their direct line to Fujairah, which is outside an Indian Ocean. It's an Indian Ocean terminal. And by and large, it's as if the world can live with that in terms of oil. What is far more questionable is whether it can live without the LNG produced notably from Qatar and a certain amount from the UAE, given that there is no alternative way of getting that gas to market other than shipping it through the Strait of Hormuz.
Now, according to reports, only 33 vessels passed through Hormuz from Monday to Thursday, just this week alone. So at what point does disruption become a genuine global supply crisis? I know you're saying that a lot of people, including ordinary consumers, have to start getting used to it.
I think we're in a state of near permanent crisis. I do hope, I think everybody hopes, that Iran and Oman will reach some kind of an agreement. But even if they do, and you start getting a resumption of routine traffic through the strait, it won't have lifted the threat of renewed engagements between the United States and Iran. And also note this: the Gulf states have relied on the United States for protection. They are going to be concerned that that protection has not been quite what they expected. Indeed, the confrontation between the United States and Iran is what has led precisely to a crisis that they've never seen before, namely the closure of their main export route. So I think we're going to see tensions in that area, not just simply between the United States and Iran, but a sort of tripartite, three-way set of tensions between the US on one side, Iran on another, and somewhere unhappily in the middle, the Arab Gulf states.
Briefly, before I let you go, Mr. Roberts, how quickly can alternative pipelines and shipping routes compensate then for the volumes normally moving through the strait?
It's possible for the Saudis relatively quickly to beef up their oil pipeline. In other words, they've got the engineering techniques and the expertise to manage to double the capacity of the East-West pipeline, though that would probably take, shall we say, a good year to do it. What would be far more complex would be developing a gas pipeline to serve Qatari exports, which are wholly reliant on LNG, apart from a certain amount that goes to its Gulf neighbors by pipeline. And the other point is, if you build these big new pipelines, do they simply become targets the next time that there is confrontation in the area? We're living in a very uncertain world. And in this case, the best we can hope for is a sort of de facto truce in the Strait of Hormuz, in which the two-lane system comes into effect. A certain amount of payments will go to Iran for transit, and some will go to Oman as well. Whether these are called transit fees or disguised as being necessary to secure health safeguards or whatever, they will find a way of imposing a toll, which Iran would regard as necessary to compensate it for all the damage it has suffered during the war.
Mr. John Roberts, thank you so much for your time. That's all we have for our discussion this afternoon. We really do appreciate your insights on A News.
Goodbye.
Now, still in the Middle East, Yemen's Houthi movement says it has launched fresh attacks against Saudi-linked targets, claiming missile strikes on an oil tanker in the Gulf of Aden and military positions in eastern Yemen.
The Houthis say they carried out a series of attacks against Saudi-linked targets on Wednesday and Thursday, as tensions with Saudi Arabia continue to rise. The group claimed it struck the Saudi oil tanker Daisy with a ballistic missile in the Gulf of Aden, forcing the vessel to turn back. Hours earlier, it had also reported targeting another Saudi tanker in the northern Red Sea, saying the attacks were part of what it calls a maritime blockade against Saudi Arabia.
Our armed forces carried out a broad and qualitative military operation targeting the Saudi enemy's mobilizations in the areas of Al-Ruwayq, Al-Aba and Al-Thanaya, as well as other camps belonging to the so-called 1st and 3rd Emergency Regiments, using a large number of ballistic missiles and drones. The results of the operation were as follows: killing and injuring of hundreds of the Saudi enemy's mercenaries, the destroying and burning a large number of the Saudi enemy's camps, mobilizations, warehouses and weapons in the Al-Wadiya area in the eastern part of the country, and destroying a large number of military vehicles present in the targeted camps.
Yemeni government sources, however, said at least 30 government troops were killed in attacks on military camps in Marib and Hadramaut provinces, warning the death toll could rise. The latest developments come after the Houthis announced a maritime ban on Saudi-linked shipping last month, accusing Riyadh of maintaining a blockade on Houthi-controlled areas. Yemen has remained divided by conflict since 2014, when the Houthis seized the capital, Sana'a, prompting a Saudi-led military intervention the following year.
U.S.-mediated negotiations between Lebanon and Israel have wrapped up in Rome with some progress, but no agreement on the main territorial dispute. The latest round also laid the groundwork for further next month's talks.
3 days of negotiations between Israel and Lebanon produced agreements on prisoner procedures and future security arrangements, but failed to break the deadlock over disputed border areas. The latest round of talks covered military, political, legal and border issues, along with the question of prisoners. Negotiators were unable to agree on expanding the proposed areas for a phased Israeli withdrawal along the border. Lebanon wants an additional area included, while Israel said verification measures in the first 2 areas should be completed before any expansion. Despite the impasse, the sides exchanged preliminary lists of detained and missing people. Lebanon submitted a list of its citizens who are detained or unaccounted for, saying the release of civilian detainees should come first. Israel provided a list of Lebanese Jews who are missing or believed to have been killed in Lebanon. Sources said the parties also agreed on potential future monitoring arrangements and to pursue a new UN Security Council resolution that would provide the international framework for security arrangements following the mandate of the UN interim force in Lebanon. US officials have reportedly committed to continuing engagement with both sides on detainees and border demarcation ahead of the next round of negotiations. For now, they are tentatively scheduled for September 1st. Meanwhile, the United Nations said it recorded the sharpest escalation in Israeli military activity since late June, with 120 projectiles fired by Israel by late afternoon on Thursday. UN peacekeepers also reported airstrikes and dozens of Israeli airspace violations, saying they were using liaison channels with both militaries to help ease tensions and support the existing ceasefire.
US President Donald Trump's Board of Peace has issued its first construction contract for Gaza, a project to build a small military outpost for Morocco troops, according to reports. The planned facility would house around 150 personnel as part of an international stabilization force expected to support security arrangements in the territory. The contract has not yet been finalized and is expected to be one of several projects linked to Trump's Gaza reconstruction plans. The move comes as much of Gaza remains heavily damaged following the war, with millions of residents still facing severe humanitarian challenges. And now for a short break, after which we'll look at the latest on Russia-Ukraine war and how Kyiv's drone campaign is affecting Moscow. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to A News. Now, Ukraine says it has intensified its long-range attacks on Russian military and energy infrastructure. President Volodymyr Zelensky is also pushing to fast-track the development of Ukraine's own advanced missile defense capabilities. Here's the latest on the story.
Ukraine says it has carried out long-range strikes on 2 Russian oil refineries, as well as targeting patrol boats and other vessels in the Black Sea. In a post on Telegram, President Volodymyr Zelensky said Ukrainian forces struck the Bashneft Novoil refinery in Bashkortostan. He says they also struck the Slavneft Yanos refinery in Russia's Yaroslavl region. The regional governor said emergency crews extinguished a major fire at the refinery following what he described as the largest Ukrainian drone attack on the region. He said Russian air defenses shot down 93 drones. He also said 4 people suffered shrapnel injuries, but there were no fatalities. The Yaroslavl refinery, which has been targeted before, processes around 15 million tons of oil a year. The latest exchanges have also drawn international concern. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has strongly condemned the recent wave of large-scale missile and drone attacks by both Russia and Ukraine, according to a UN spokesperson.
The Secretary-General is deeply concerned by the continued escalation of the conflict, including onto the territory of the Russian Federation. In this regard, he also condemns the recent Ukrainian drone attacks on several regions of the Russian Federation, which reportedly resulted in civilian casualties and damage to civilian infrastructure.
Meanwhile, President Zelensky says Ukraine is stepping up efforts to develop its own advanced missile defense capabilities. He says he has met senior officials to speed up weapons development, with the aim of delivering tangible results by the end of the year. He also says Ukraine wants to accelerate work on both an anti-ballistic missile defense system and domestically produced ballistic missiles.
Only a tiny minority of countries worldwide have developed an anti-ballistic project of this kind for themselves. Ukraine must join this group of nations. We are creating all the necessary conditions to make that happen. Others spent decades developing their systems. Ukraine must do this as quickly as possible, with concrete results already in place by the turn of 2026 to 2027. Ukraine is also working to develop ballistic missiles of its own. The tests have shown strong potential. We need to turn this into a real weapon.
Zelensky also referred to Ukraine's participation in the Freya program, a joint European project to develop an anti-ballistic missile defense system as an alternative to the Patriot system used by the United States.
Ukraine's long-range drone campaign is increasingly affecting everyday life in Russia. The country's leading online retailer, Wildberries, is now at the center of a growing disruption, with businesses across the country feeling the consequences.
Ukraine's drone strikes have knocked out more than a fifth of Wildberries' warehouse capacity, disrupting deliveries across Russia and hitting thousands of businesses that rely on the country's leading e-commerce retailer. Since the 18th of July, around 20 Wildberries warehouse sites have been targeted, sparking major fires and disrupting the company's logistics network. A Reuters review of satellite imagery found that at least 1.18 million square meters of storage space has been damaged or destroyed. The disruption is being felt by franchise operators and online sellers who depend on Wildberries to reach customers. According to Wildberries, 95% of customer orders are collected from pickup points. More than 3,100 franchise pickup points have now been put up for sale across Russia.
Sales have dropped by about 50% over the past month, and that is because there are almost no deliveries. There is still some inventory being cleared from warehouses, but every month the volume keeps declining.
Ukraine has accused Wildberries of supporting Russia's war effort and says its strikes are intended to making it more expensive for Moscow to keep going. The company and the Kremlin have denied allegations that Wildberries is supplying the military. The company has introduced discounts, payment deferrals, and voluntary compensation for sellers who've been affected by drone attacks. The fashion brand Fin Flair, which lost more than $1 million worth of stock, is one of them.
We plan to negotiate with Wildberries. They are one of our key partners. It has been and remains our key partner. At the moment, we have information that Wildberries will be making compensation payments. They plan to start with smaller sellers because they were affected the most.
But for many businesses, the disruption is ongoing. With deliveries still constrained and thousands of sellers affected, uncertainty remains over how quickly Wildberries can restore its logistics network and how long businesses can withstand the disruption.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to meet with Serbian President Alexander Vučić in capital Belgrade on Saturday, when he makes an official visit to the country, according to the Office of the President of Serbia. The trip will be Zelensky's first visit to Serbia, who has largely refrained from backing sanctions against Russia following Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. According to Serbian President, the talks will focus on the integration of Ukraine and Serbia into Europe, bilateral economic cooperation, and cooperation in the energy sector. The Serbian leader also noted that the parties will explore ways to provide mutual support in the European integration process. Azerbaijan's Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov met with Ukrainian President Zelensky on Thursday during an official visit to Ukraine. Both parties discussed current and future strategic partnership between Azerbaijan and Ukraine, including political dialogue, energy, transport, and humanitarian cooperation. Also on the agenda were discussions on regional security and the situation in Ukraine, with Azerbaijan reiterating its support for Kiev's sovereignty and territorial integrity. President Zelensky thanked President Ilham Aliyev and the Azerbaijani government for their continued assistance to Ukraine. Staying on this regional story then, I'm joined by Murad Muradov, the Deputy Director of the Tuftubashov Center. Hello and welcome back to A News.
Hello, good afternoon. It's a pleasure.
So Ukraine has been in talks to import Azerbaijan's gas. Can Azerbaijan then become a more significant energy security partner for Ukraine?
Well, I remember that talks about potential purchase of gas from Azerbaijan have been going since 2024, and back then there was a scheme actually designed, in order to create a working mechanism for Ukraine to stop purchases of gas from Russia, which actually had taken place by the time. So the idea was that Russian gas will be stopped. Transits through Ukraine, and in order to compensate for this gap in consumption, which was being emerging, well, Ukraine planned to start purchases of certain amounts of gas from Baku. This deal didn't take place back then, and most probably due to Russia's unwillingness to support it. But now there are conditions for that, and well, Azerbaijan's increasing deep energy ties with Europe and diversification of Baku's export portfolio mean that Baku can at some point start to contribute, albeit a small amount of gas. It's still very important for a country at war.
All right, so with Ukraine still at war with Russia, what practical security cooperation can Azerbaijan offer Kiev beyond diplomatic support?
Well, of course, Ukraine's war is much bigger than the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, both in terms of scope and in terms of the severity of strikes that the country has to withstand, and also Russia widely uses ballistic missiles against Ukraine, and recently it has also started to resort to the most damaging types of these missiles. But still, for Ukraine, I think Azerbaijan's experience with the mining and also with conducting rapid special force operation matters was along the front line with Russia. Well, very often, let's say the outcomes of fighting over certain parts of territory are decided in this sort of engagements. Moreover, Ukraine as well as Azerbaijan is widely using drones, and of course, since 2020, the types of drones and the power has evolved tremendously, and we now see that it's a two-way street. Well, Azerbaijan is also willing to learn from Ukraine's anti-drone experience, and since Kiev has developed its own low-cost options in order to contain Russian drone attacks, and in the light of the instability of the Middle East, and the sea of Iran using drones against many countries in the region, this becomes important. But still, I think the experience accumulated by Azerbaijan in this type of small-scale and intensive warfare can be helpful for Ukraine, indeed.
Here's an interesting question for you, Mr. Muradov. Both countries want stronger transport links. Can Azerbaijan and Ukraine turn to the middle corridor into a serious alternative trade route between Asia and Europe?
Well, I'm not sure that Ukraine right now, is, let's say, primarily interested in basically middle corridor, etc. I mean, it's a foreign country, and basically it has a lifeline from the west, from Poland, where Ukraine receives both its arms support and also a lot of humanitarian support, food, etc. Since this route is relatively safe, well, we see that now the Black Sea has been subject to increasingly severe strikes, which has put the sea the shipping in the sea almost to halt. And in the last few days, almost no ships enter both Russian and Ukrainian seaports on the Black Sea. And this is why I would say Ukraine's southward logistics, which can potentially connect it to the middle corridor running through Turkey and South Caucasus, is now unfortunately extremely limited. But of course, I'm sure that Kiev is already contemplating, the options for restoring its economy and its humanitarian infrastructure after the war. I mean, after the at least ceasefire is achieved. And in this case, of course, the Kiev-Moscow hostility will probably remain for years at least. And this is why Ukraine will have to expand its alternative connections. And I'm sure that after the war, it will prioritize this southward direction, which will eventually connect it to the east-west routes from China and Central Asia to Europe.
Yes. So Azerbaijan has already supported Ukraine during the war with Russia. Is Baku now positioning itself to play a bigger role in Ukraine's reconstruction?
Yes, indeed. And Baku, from the early stages of this war, was providing significant humanitarian support to Ukraine. And must remember that Baku's undertaking to reconstruct a school in Irpin, a city near Kiev, which was subject to severe attacks in the first weeks of the war, and where a number of war crimes were committed against purely civilian citizens. This initiative by Azerbaijan has been very highly appreciated in Ukraine and including society. And it's a very strong breach, that positioned Baku among the most active supporters and of Ukraine's restoration. So, we know that Baku has taken part in a number of conferences dedicated to restoring Ukraine, which are organized regularly, and it has already expressed significant interest, to become a big player in this process, and which was also supported by President Aliyev, who a number of times stated that, for Azerbaijan, the end of war in Ukraine is very hoped for and aspired development. And I'm sure that we will see Azerbaijani businesses, taking strong interest in the country, especially given how political and humanitarian connections between our nations have developed and strengthened during this very hard years.
Yeah, briefly before I let you go, what other sectors can realistically be ready for Azerbaijani capital now, despite the war?
Well, I'm again not sure that right now one of the spheres that Ukraine needs the most. Logistics, of course, and Ukraine is now dependent on supplies of a number of foods, of building materials. I'm not sure, let's say, how possible it will be for businesses to get in on a large scale, but definitely with this reconstruction projects which continue during the war, despite the war, I think it's a chance for Azerbaijani construction companies, to better explore the market, and hopefully, as the severity of the conflict recedes, and as the scope of works in Ukraine expands, I'm sure this sector will play a big role. But also, on the other hand, Azerbaijan is a significant, let's say, exporter of foods, of agricultural goods, fruit and vegetables, first of all. And before the war, Ukraine was one of the major importers. Of course, since 2022, these imports have fallen, and I'm sure that Azerbaijani producers will target Ukraine as one of the key export markets once its potential comes back to the normal.
All right, Mr. Murad Muradov, Deputy Director of the Topchuvashov Center, thank you once again for always making the time for A News.
Thank you so much.
All right, now a surge of migrants into Spain's Ceuta enclave has left at least 100 people dead, with many still stranded. It's put immense pressure then on the small territory located on Morocco's coast. The number of migrants nearly equaled the number of residents living there. More on the story. Have a look at this report.
At least 100 people died during the mass migrant surge into the Ceuta enclave last week, according to the city's leader, Juan Jesus Vivas. Around 72,000 migrants entered the territory, and between 3,000 and 5,000 are still there. Reception centres for adults and children have been overwhelmed, with officials saying the centres are under severe strain. The sudden influx has also put heavy pressure on local residents in the tiny city, which is home to just over 80,000 people and covers less than 20 square kilometres. Many of those arriving said they came looking for work and a better life. But for most, Ceuta is not the final destination. They hope to reach mainland Spain and eventually other parts of Europe.
I want to work. I can't find anything in Morocco. In Spain, I'd do anything. Furniture making, working at a barber shop, whatever. I just want to earn a living.
Authorities say essential services and accommodation facilities have been stretched to the breaking point. Residents say the city has long been a place where different communities live together. But the sudden change has put growing pressure on daily life.
Ceuta is a very small city, but we have always lived in harmony across 4 cultures. We never had any problems. Those who came here said they were told that in Spain they would find jobs, food and housing. But all that information was false.
I understand they live in poverty and want a better life. I really do. But please understand us too. We have only 80,000 people here, and suddenly more than 70,000 arrived. How are we supposed to absorb that? We don't have the space. We don't have the capacity, and we certainly don't have the policies to handle it.
Although border crossings are gradually returning to normal, thousands remain stranded, and it's putting enormous strain on local services. The crisis has also shaken Europe, renewing concerns over migration and border security.
Now, as migration remains a major challenge around the world, countries continue to strengthen border controls and security measures. In the United States, construction is underway on a new barrier along the US-Mexico border in an effort to reinforce border security.
Construction crews working on a new steel barrier along the US-Mexico border between New Mexico and Chihuahua states. The new double-layered structure will replace sections of older fencing. The project follows President Donald Trump's continued push to expand the border wall with Mexico. During his first term, the administration said more than 450 miles of barriers had been completed. Since returning to office, U.S. Customs and Border Protection records show further sections have been added, with more construction expected. The effort received a major boost through a new spending package signed into law by Trump. It allocated billions of dollars for border security measures, including wall construction, water barriers, and surveillance technology. Administration officials say the main section of the wall is expected to be completed as early as next year. However, the expanded barrier remains only part of the wider planned system, with hundreds of miles still unfinished. The project also continues to face legal challenges and environmental approval hurdles. The U.S. Border Patrol Agency says in 2025, more than 237,000 migrants crossed from Mexico into the United States, a major drop from previous years.
After the break, we continue with the main stories shaping the region. Stay tuned. Kyrgyz President Sadir Japarov has held talks with Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan during a meeting in Cholopan-Ata. The two leaders discussed expanding trade, investment and broader bilateral cooperation. Civil Rajapova reports from Tashkent.
Kyrgyz President Sadyr Japarov met Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan in Cholpon-Ata, where the two leaders discussed ways to strengthen bilateral relations, with a particular focus on trade, investment and economic cooperation. Transport connectivity was another key topic of the talks. Pashinyan noted that improving transport links across the South Caucasus could further strengthen commercial ties and support future economic cooperation. Trade between the two countries has been growing steadily. Armenia exported more than $14 million worth of goods to Kyrgyzstan in 2024, while Kyrgyz exports to Armenia total just over $700,000. Officials from both countries expressed confidence that closer cooperation and stronger transport links could help further increase bilateral trade and investment in the coming years. Cyril Vajapov reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has said that his country currently has no intention of joining the EU as an alternative to the Eurasian Economic Union. Speaking at a meeting at the EAEU Intergovernmental Council in Kyrgyzstan, Pashinyan said Armenia understands that it is not possible to be a member of both the EAEU and the EU at the same time. He added that even if Armenia ever becomes ready for EU membership in the future, this would not automatically lead to accession. Such a move would require approval from EU member states as well as support from Armenian citizens.
As you know, in 2025, Armenia adopted a law on launching the process of joining the European Union. The strategic goal behind adopting this law is to create an alternative path for our country. We understand that simultaneous membership in both the Eurasian Economic Union and the European Union is not possible. However, the adoption of this law does not mean that Armenia currently has the possibility of becoming an EU member. When Armenia is ready for EU membership in the future, that still does not mean the country will automatically become a member of the European Union. This would require the approval of EU member states, as well as the support of Armenian citizens.
Azerbaijan has filed a formal complaint with Georgia after truck drivers said they were held for days at the border with no explanation. Georgia says it's investigating. A News' Nini Nikolashvili has the story from Tbilisi.
Azerbaijan's embassy in Tbilisi filed a diplomatic note on the 5th of August. It follows reports that a group of Azerbaijani drivers carrying transit cargo were held at checkpoints, including Sarpi and Red Bridge, as well as Tbilisi's Customs Clearance Center. Drivers said their documents were confiscated without an official reason given. Georgia's foreign minister confirmed the report, saying the note was passed to relevant state agencies, saying it is taking measures according to Georgian law. Georgia's revenue service has said that cargo movement through checkpoints has been running smoothly and that the case is under investigation. This is not the first time a situation like this has happened. In November, trucks carrying tobacco from Azerbaijan to Europe via Georgia were stopped at Batumi and Tbilisi customs for roughly 20 days without explanation. Complaints about the treatment of Azerbaijan drivers first surfaced in September 2025. Georgia's prime minister has said he found no evidence of a systemic problem. Georgia has positioned itself as a regional connectivity hub linking South Caucasus, Europe, Turkey, and Central Asia. However, these kinds of reported delays affecting Azerbaijan, one of its closest partners, is a test of these relationships. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
The first submarine fiber optic cable across the Caspian Sea has been successfully installed as part of Azerbaijan's Digital Silk Way initiative. The 380-kilometer cable connects Samgyang and Azerbaijan with Aktau in Kazakhstan, creating a new digital link between Europe and Asia. Implemented by Azer Telecom and Kazakh Telecom, the project is expected to boost data exchange capacity and strengthen regional connectivity. The cable is scheduled to become fully operational by the end of 2026. Azerbaijan's state oil fund, known as the Sofos, has made its first joint investment with partners in Latin America. The deal gives the company an indirect stake in Peru's largest independent electricity producer as it seeks to diversify its global portfolio.
Azerbaijan's state oil fund, SOFAS, has made its first joint investment with partners in Latin America, backing Peru's largest independent power producer, Inkia Energy. SOFAS has invested in Inkia Energy through a fund managed by global infrastructure investor I2 Capital. Inkia operates hydroelectric, natural gas, solar and wind power assets with a combined effective capacity of 2.6 gigawatts. The company accounts for approximately 22% of Peru's electricity generation. It also has more than 4 gigawatts of projects under development, primarily in renewable energy. SOFAS says the deal supports its strategy of expanding its global infrastructure portfolio and diversifying geographically. The investment also expands SOFAS's presence in Latin America, where rising electricity demand, growing infrastructure needs, and renewable energy development are creating new opportunities for international investors.
All right, that's the news this hour. Thank you for joining me, Tim Tongana, and the team behind the scenes. Stay tuned to A News for all the latest updates. Have a great weekend. Goodbye.